Hey Will, what's up? I got your response, and I'd like to address a few of the topics you mentioned. You first suggested that I was using extreme examples of religious behavior to represent all of religion, and that the same could be done for any other group, including atheists. But the examples I cited were hardly outliers, and most of these beliefs and practices are quite common within religion. This isn't about generalizing all believers based on a small group of fanatics. It's just taking everyday people at their word about what they claim to believe, and addressing them in terms of what they actually do. Suggesting that this is mistaken is almost like saying that we shouldn't really believe what religious people say when they talk about their faith. Are they always going to be too extreme to be representative, no matter what they believe? You also implied that I was using these unusual examples within religion and the harm that they cause as a basis to claim that their religion is therefore false. Actually, I was not saying that this is why their beliefs are wrong. I was really stating the opposite. It's not false because it's harmful because it's false, and it's based on some serious misapprehensions about how the world functions. As I explained at length, if you're doing something because of your religion and your religion isn't actually true, then it was all for nothing. You then repeated the claim that opposing the spread of religion can be considered the same thing as spreading religion. You described the opposition to religion as a belief in itself, specifically a belief that those things are wrong. This is misleading, because grouping both of these positions together by labeling them as beliefs oversimplifies and inaccurately equates them by stripping away their most relevant features, such as their actual merits. Instead, they're all just beliefs, so they can all be treated the same. I don't subscribe to that. You seem to think that I have to universally oppose ever spreading any belief. I don't, and I never said that. I find it perfectly acceptable for atheists to do so as a way of counteracting religious beliefs, in the same way that promoting equality is better and more justifiable than spreading racism. And if this happens to involve spreading our belief that they are wrong, then so be it. Not all viewpoints are created equal, and again, a belief and its absence are total opposites. Treating these positions as equivalent is like if someone suggested putting Jews into ghettos, and I said, hey, maybe let's not do that, and you told me you're just pushing your beliefs on other people. It's kind of missing the point, and the point is that they're wrong. That's an important difference. You also suggested that encouraging the spread of atheism constitutes a worldview. First of all, much like choosing to classify something as a belief, calling something a worldview is not an indictment of it nor an argument against it. As I explained, I have my reasons for promoting atheism, and I believe that there are many other people who would agree with these reasons and share this view. But again, this is not an integral or necessary part of atheism itself, which is just the lack of belief in gods. That's why, as I pointed out, there are atheists who may not share this view. It's not intrinsic to atheism. You then claim that the burden of proof is on atheists to prove that no gods exist. Why? We're not in the position of disputing an established and well-founded theory. Instead, we're faced with a claim that has no evidence or proof in its favor at all. To say that we would have the burden of proof, while this position would not, is plainly absurd. In making such a claim with no evidence, you've given us nothing to argue against, so how can you reasonably expect us to do so? Those who would make such a claim should explain why it should even be up for consideration in the first place. You further said that atheists don't think they have the burden of proof. Well, for the aforementioned reasons, we don't. This is not something that's been decisively proven, and now it's up to the dissenters to find a better alternative. Every religious argument has failed to show the existence of gods, and there has never been any evidence of this, ever. Even if we don't have the burden of proof, we are still willing to answer your claims, as I've been doing for the past year. But so far, every purported proof that's been offered has been weak, dubious, and handily refuted. You also said that if we're arguing that something is wrong, then we have to explain what's right. Not necessarily. Showing that something is wrong does, at the very least, show that what's right must be something other than that. But if your position is flawed, then we can certainly identify those flaws, without having to offer something else to replace your belief. The flaws in your belief will remain, regardless of whether an alternative is proposed. You then said it's up to atheists to show that it's more probable that there are no gods than that there are. But why is it not up to you to first prove that the existence of gods is more probable, or probable at all. Regardless, I don't think probability is the most appropriate criterion for this. There's not even enough evidence to assign any probability to the existence of gods, so what would we be basing that on? I also don't think showing that the existence or non-existence of gods is more probable would be sufficient here, either for believers or atheists. If it were somehow proven that there's a 60% chance there are gods and a 40% chance there are no gods, would that then justify acting as though there's a 0% chance there are no gods? No, because having a lower likelihood does not mean it can't happen. That likelihood is what probability is meant to specify, meaning that there would still be a significant chance that there actually are no gods. Similarly, if there was a 60% chance that there are no gods, should the possibility of gods be ignored? Of course not, because there would still be a 4 in 10 chance that we're living in a universe where there are gods. If there was a 40% chance that an asteroid was going to strike the Earth, we wouldn't disregard this just because there is a 60% chance that it won't. The existence of gods would potentially have even greater ramifications. Now, you said that if there are no objective morals, then who are we to say that something is wrong? Who are we? Well, we're people who can explain why certain things should be considered right or wrong, and we have some pretty good reasons for this. We think these reasons are adequate without having to refer to any objective morals. If you see that as nothing of any value, I would have to wonder if you're just not listening. Why do morals have to be objective in order for them to have any value? If any objective morals actually did exist, then it seems that they would supersede our own morals. But in the absence of objective morals, why would our own well-argued morals have no value of their own? You then suggested that since most people would agree that some things are always wrong, like dismembering children, this means that things have objective moral properties of being right or wrong. In other words, our moral intuitions or feelings of what's right or wrong are supposed to function as a guide to objective morality. The problem is that our moral intuitions have been and continue to be wildly inconsistent. If this is supposed to indicate an objective morality, then which morality is supposed to be objectively true? Just as you and I would consider the corporal punishment of rape victims under Islamic law to be absolutely the wrong thing to do, those who would enforce this punishment feel that it is exactly the right thing to do. If our intuitions point to an objective morality, whose intuitions are the right ones? In 1750, it was taken as a given that a woman's proper place was as the subordinate of her husband. In 1850, it was axiomatic that black people were inherently inferior to whites. In 1950, it was simply assumed that gay people had some kind of disorder, and in those times, people would just as strenuously insist that their morality was objective and forever fixed, and that's that. Do you really think it would have been suitable for the allegedly objective morals of the 18th century to persist unchanged and apply to us as well? So what makes you so certain that we, here and now, have finally uncovered what the real objective morality is? I would consider it almost a certainty that 100 years from now, something that we currently view as acceptable, even unquestionable, will instead be seen as unthinkable, and vice versa. Just like you wouldn't want to be stuck with the morality of the 1700s, are you really going to insist that the future must be bound by your concept of what objective morality is? Why would you want to rule out the possibility of further moral development, of the same kind that we've experienced on the way to where we are now? Questioning, doubting, and reevaluating our morality serves an important purpose. That's not a weakness. Sometimes it's necessary. And recognizing that our morality is not objective means leaving the door open to this kind of change. You say that the inconsistencies in people's moral standards is only due to differences in how they understand objective morality. But if our grasp of this objective morality is so poor as to be indistinguishable from if we had just created morality on our own, how can we know that these objective morals are even real? What makes you think that people are actually becoming acquainted more or less accurately with objective moral values that really exist? And why would you cite people's moral perceptions as a proof of objective morality if you recognize how flawed and erroneous they are? You said that you weren't arguing that any specific objective morality is true, only that there is an objective morality. But wouldn't showing that a certain moral is objective and true be the most direct way of proving that there's there must be an objective morality? Can you effectively argue that there are objective morals without demonstrating that some objective moral values actually exist? You also said that you view the truth of objective morality in the same way that you view the truth of objective reality. The difference is that at least we have objective reality to refer to, and that makes it pretty simple to come to an agreement on what reality consists of. It's self-evident, but for allegedly objective morality, we have nothing similar that we could base our perceptions upon. Our basic perception of reality has never been so remarkably inconsistent as our understanding of morality, and I think it's worth considering that there may not even be an objective morality for us to perceive. You claim that if morality isn't objective, then our views about morality would apply only to ourselves and would not be applicable to everyone else. But morals don't have to be objective in order to be universally applicable. Morality may not be objective in the sense of having a real objective existence, but if there are compelling reasons for why it's appropriate for you to act a certain way, then these reasons would be just as applicable to others as well. After all, if they don't apply to everyone else, then why would they apply to you either? The whole point of morality is to put forth a standard for how we all should behave, and morality can offer such a standard even if it doesn't have an objective existence. You asked again if I consider morality to be objective or not, when I say that some morals can be established strongly enough that we can treat them as if they were objective. I maintain that it isn't. I was simply explaining that some morals can be very well-founded, but this doesn't make them objective, and they should still be open to scrutiny in case superior morals are developed, which render them obsolete. I recognize that speaking of morals and moral properties of things as if they were objective can be helpful and comes somewhat naturally to us, and I think that's acceptable in the case of certain very well-supported morals, as long as we keep in mind that these morals aren't actually real things and could conceivably change. You then said that if morality isn't objective, then you're free to disagree with it. Well, of course you are. You're certainly free to disagree, as is everyone else. The question is, what reasons do you have, and is there any reason why the rest of us should consider your objections to be valid? If they are convincing, then we may very well share your views and adopt them as our own. If not, then why should we take your objections seriously? You further said that if morality is something we have to work out for ourselves, then you would hope that we would exclude people like Hitler and Geert Wilders from the conversation. While this may have just been sarcastic, I would have to ask, why? Are we unable to consider their morality on its merits? Are you afraid that there may not be a valid case against their morality? If we disagree with their views, then we should be able to offer an effective refutation. We can certainly rule out and ignore their morality once it's been shown to be bad, but we should be able to explain why their ideas are wrong if we're going to say they're wrong. We can't just arbitrarily exclude people from the moral discourse from the outset just because we don't like them or because of our unreliable moral intuitions. If their conception of morality really is flawed and inferior, then this will be exposed when it's subjected to everyone else's scrutiny. You claim that if morality isn't objective, then we could never judge anyone, and you used the example of a judge's ruling in a court of law. You further said that if a person's own understanding of morality differed, this would not be an effective defense. I find it interesting that you would use the justice system as an example of objective morality, considering that it has hardly any features of the objective morality that you've described. The entire justice system and the very concept of law is something that we had to create. A judge's rulings are at their discretion and can vary, and they can also be overturned on appeal. The law itself can be changed if we collectively decide to do so. Laws are actually a very good example of morals that are considered so well established that they are treated as an enforceable social norm, and yet they are still open to change. This is why a criminal's objection that they simply have different morals most likely would not be effective, although it is possible for laws to be overturned. Most importantly, laws and rulings are not issued just because, in the sense of objective moral properties that are just inherent to certain things, and that's that. Instead, it is expected that there will be good reasons for the laws that we make and the rulings that are issued. They do not simply exist as absolutes for no reason other than they just do. We have to come up with them, and we have to justify them. them. So this doesn't mean we have no standard by which to judge anyone or anything. It just means we have to define that standard because it doesn't already exist as a feature of reality. You then asked me to explain what I meant by the comparison of exploring morality versus building and testing morality. This was just my way of illustrating the difference between finding morals that already exist and having to come up with them ourselves because there aren't any. To extend the analogy, it's not as if we're charting the landscape of a continent called morality. It isn't something that's already sitting out there somewhere waiting for us to discover it. We're not mapping the objective moral territory because there is no such territory. So no, I'm not saying there are moral absolutes. I'm just saying morality is something we have to develop. You also asked if I could prove that the morals we come up with aren't actually just objective morals that we've discovered. Most significantly, our morals have differed greatly over time, and still do, which is rather inconsistent with having actually discovered some concrete thing. If these are objective morals that we've discovered, then they would be very contradictory. And I think it's rather telling that there still remains no proof that there actually are any objective morals. If you want to say that a certain moral value exists objectively, then you can go ahead and prove that. But without any reason to think that a moral is objective, I see no reason to assume that it is. I'm not the one claiming that any morals are objective, and it seems like a very conservative assumption that the morals we come up with aren't necessarily something objective. Now, you said that I don't understand what objective means. I do, but I just don't share your view on whether such objective morals exist. My question was rhetorical and meant to ask whether good and evil actually are objective. You said that good and evil exist. My question was, do they really? You also claim that objective moral values are placed within the mind of God, and so they are objective to us. Does that mean God could conceivably change his mind and thus change what's supposedly objective? Is what's objective dependent upon God's state of mind? If it can be changed and could just as easily be something other than what it is, can it really be called objective? Alternately, does God have no other choice but to select specific morals to be objective? If that's the case and those particular morals were the only option, wouldn't they be objective already? Why would God even be necessary? Finally, you claim that if there are no objective morals, then we can never say what ought to be, and we couldn't condemn someone for, say, raping children. As I've already explained, we actually could. It's just that the morality we would refer to isn't going to be objective. This sense of what ought to be can certainly be meaningful if there are good reasons behind it. If it was just our arbitrary and unjustified whims, it wouldn't really mean anything. But if it's backed up with sound and persuasive reasons, then it can definitely be considered meaningful. That's not a delusion of any sort. It almost seems like you think the only options are objective morality or no morality whatsoever, and that's not necessarily the case. But suppose there were objective moral values that pertain to raping and dismembering children, and they just happen to say that this is objectively the right thing to do. How would you deal with that? Would you proceed with the raping and the dismembering because objective morality demands it? Or would you refuse? Would you try to find fault with this? Would you say, that can't possibly be right? Would you try to come up with the best possible reasons for why raping and dismembering children is wrong? I know I would. And once you take away the objective moral that says raping and dismembering children is right, those very good reasons for why we shouldn't do it are still there. And that is where our morality comes from.